Hi, I'm Margaret, and my sister turned my worst breakdown into a runway look, not a tribute, not an inspired by moment. She took the sketch I drew during a seizure, when I couldn't speak, couldn't move, and made it the grand finale of her fashion show. The audience clapped. Vogue called it brave. And my name? Never spoken. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was hearing my own mother say, "Some people are born to shine. Others are born to reflect it." So I stayed quiet, until someone else finally said the truth out loud. But now I wonder, how many people applauded my pain before they realized who it belonged to? My apartment always smells like paper and lavender, not because I want it to, but because that's what comfort ended up smelling like. I live on the east side of Portland in a two-room unit above a florist. The floors creak when I walk. The walls don't keep secrets, but the quiet hum of it all, it lets me breathe. I've lived here for 6 years, alone, mostly by choice. I work from home, I draw, design, sometimes consult for local artists. And when it gets too loud in my head, I reach for the sketchbook. Not because I'm chasing beauty. I don't draw what people want to see. I draw what I need to say. The noise, the static, the parts of me that never learned how to fit into polite conversation. I was scrolling through my laptop that evening, just killing time before bed. My sister's name showed up on a banner ad. Isolde Marshall presents Unraveled, a fashion experience. I nearly laughed. Of course, another show, another city. Isolde had always known how to dress up ambition in silk and shimmer. But as the ad expanded into a slideshow, my laughter dropped cold. The second image stopped me. It wasn't just familiar. It was mine. A model, wrapped in jagged pleats of iridescent fabric, curled into a posture I knew better than my own reflection. Her shoulders bent forward, arms pulled tight across the body. A mask-like hood, layered in translucent shades of blue, veiled her face. I didn't just recognize the design. I recognized the feeling. It was Sensory Shell. I'd drawn it 8 months ago, after a particularly rough week in therapy. It wasn't meant for eyes. It was meant for understanding, for me. A way to map the shutdowns, the overload, the days when light stabbed instead of shining. And I had only shown that sketch to one person. Isolde came over back in the fall, pretending to care about my new paper. She flipped through pages casually, commented on the textures. When she got to that page, she paused for just a second too long. Then she smiled. Not the kind that says, "I see you." The kind that says, "I can use this." She asked if she could borrow the sketchbook, said she liked the way the pages felt. She brought it back 2 days later. I didn't check it right away, and when I did, that sketch, Sensory Shell, was gone. I told myself I'd misplaced it, told myself a lot of things, but now, seeing it reimagined, repackaged, titled The Final Piece, I knew better. I didn't call her. What would I say? That I knew she took it? She'd just say it was inspired by, not stolen. That we shared influences. That I should be flattered. Instead, I closed my laptop and went to the bookshelf, pulled out the sketchbook. I flipped through it slowly. One page missing, cleanly torn out. No accidental rip. No hint of hesitation. She called it collaboration once. Told an interviewer years ago, "My sister has always been a well of creative chaos. I just try to catch the waves." That used to make me feel seen. Now it makes me want to disappear. Exactly 7 days later, a thick white envelope arrived. No return address. Just a wax seal with the letter M for Marshall pressed into the back. I opened it on the kitchen counter with scissors. Inside was a creamy folded card, decked in soft rose foil. Elegant, overproduced. You are cordially invited to the Los Angeles debut of Isolde, Unraveled, a fashion experience. I stared at the title. The font. Even the envelope smelled like citrus and control. Then I looked down. My name, spelled correctly. My title, Special Guest, The Muse. I set the card down, walked to the sink, turned on the cold water, let it run. I wasn't sure what stung more, being erased completely or being rewritten as ornamental. They didn't call me co-creator, not artist, not contributor, just a muse. That's the thing about being a muse. It means they credit your existence, not your work. You're not the architect, you're the aesthetic. Being called a muse is like being called a mirror, I muttered aloud. Useful only when someone else is looking into it. I didn't call Isolde. I didn't call our mother either. She would have just said something like, "This is huge, honey, what an honor!" And I would have nodded, and then swallowed it like I always did. That night, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, the envelope still sitting untouched on the kitchen counter. I wasn't angry, not exactly, just less surprised than I should have been. That's what scared me most. I pulled out my headphones, the noise putty, my small sketch pad. Not for comfort. This time, I was packing them like armor. I opened the airline website, booked a flight to LA, mid-morning departure, direct, and I whispered to no one, "If I say nothing, who will?" She called me her muse, but I remember the day she traced my pain in pencil and never gave it back. The plane ride down was uneventful, but I didn't sleep. Couldn't. My thoughts kept folding in on themselves like crumpled paper, sharp at the edges, useless for comfort. Los Angeles greeted me with its usual chaos, sunshine that felt performative, billboards that shouted everything, and people moving fast, like they had somewhere better to be. No one waited for me at the airport. I didn't expect them to. I caught a rideshare, let the driver talk about the Dodgers and traffic, and whatever else filled the silence. I nodded when needed, stared out the window most of the ride. 15 minutes later, I checked into a modest hotel near the venue. The room was clean but dim. The overhead light flickered, just enough to make me notice, not enough to complain. I unpacked slowly, headphones, sketchbook, noise putty, all there. I lined them up on the nightstand like soldiers. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and reached for my phone. I told myself I'd scroll a little, check the weather maybe. Instead, I opened Instagram. Isolde's face was the third post on my feed. She looked flawless, as always. Slicked hair, muted tones, posing like the world needed to catch up to her. Below the photo, a caption. "So honored to share how empathy drives my work. Thank you, Vogue Digital." I clicked the link. The article was headlined, "Designing Through Empathy, the Sister Who Changed My Life." My name wasn't in the title, but I wasn't surprised. I skimmed. Paragraph after paragraph, Isolde painted our childhood like a Jane Austen novel, filled with compassion, resilience, sisterhood. She spoke of having a neurodivergent sibling and how it inspired her to explore perception through fabric. Not a single name, no quote, no mention of the sketches, the therapy, the breakdowns. She said, "Growing up around difference taught me how to translate feeling into form." Then added, "This collection is a tribute to those who experience the world uniquely." Those who? Not me. My face flushed, not with embarrassment, but heat. Anger, maybe. I whispered aloud, "I'm not a concept. I'm your sister." But of course sisters don't sell. Stories do. She talked about those people, the differently abled, their inner worlds. Every word was a gentle erasure. I wasn't erased like chalk. I was painted over in soft pastels. And that's worse, because it pretends to be kind. I threw my phone on the comforter and stared at the ceiling. The flickering bulb above pulsed like it was mocking me. I didn't go out that evening. I stayed in, ordered takeout I barely touched, and flipped on the hotel's tiny TV for background noise. Around 10, a notification buzzed. Isolde's PR team had posted a behind-the-scenes video. I clicked it, hesitated, then let it play. The screen filled with soft focus clips, models getting their makeup done, swaths of fabric pinned onto mannequins, laughter backstage. A voiceover, Isolde's, spoke about intention, integrity, impact. Then came the interviews. I remembered giving one myself, months ago. Someone on her team had asked me to talk about where the idea of sensory shell came from. I'd stumbled through it, nervous but honest. I used the word shut down. I said, "It's not about drama, it's about survival." I even smiled a little at the end. That clip? Gone. Instead, the screen cut to a model saying, "She told us she wanted to embody what it feels like to live in a different brain. I thought that was beautiful." Another stylist chimed in about the courage it takes to tell someone else's story. Then Isolde's voice came back, soft and serious. "This is for the people who can't speak for themselves, so we speak through fashion." I sat up straighter. People who can't speak? I've been speaking. You just chose not to hear me. I closed the laptop slowly, pressed my palms together like I was praying for patience. But I wasn't praying, I was plotting. For a minute, I thought about packing up, flying home, letting her have it all. The runway, the applause, the rewritten version of our history. But then I remembered something my therapist once told me. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. I didn't text her. I didn't email the PR team. I didn't scream into the void. Instead, I opened a draft email to someone else. Leorin. He'd been Isolde's creative consultant on a few past shows. Quiet guy. Precise. The kind who notices everything but says nothing unless you ask the right question. I wrote, "There's something you need to know, and I think you already do." I didn't hit send, not yet. But I saved it. That was enough for tonight. She said this show was for those who couldn't speak. But what happens when they can? And you mute them anyway. I didn't expect a reply overnight, but I also didn't expect what showed up the next morning. A red carpet. It was plastered across the homepage of the event website. Unraveled. Grand debut tonight, featuring the final piece, Shell of Light. I clicked. The page loaded slow, as if daring me to regret it. There it was. Center frame, high-res, full-body shot of a model wearing the design. My design. The silhouette was unmistakable. Layers of iridescent fabric mimicked pressure points, folded just so around the torso. The sleeves were asymmetrical, one snug, the other loose, meant to convey imbalance. Even the subtle overlay of translucent mesh across the head. That was mine. My lines, my discomfort, my therapy translated into texture. I stared at it too long. My eyes began to sting, not because I was crying, just dry, like my body was tired of wasting moisture on shock. It was called Shell of Light, which was almost funny if it didn't feel like the kind of joke told at someone else's funeral. A funeral for the part of me that believed I could trust her, even a little. I closed the tab, picked up my sketchbook, flipped to the section where that drawing should have been. A single torn edge remained, smooth and intentional, like someone had removed it with care, because they knew it mattered. I remembered Isolde's fingers brushing that page, months ago, pretending to admire the paper grain. I whispered, "You didn't just take my page. You took what held me together." I sat still for a long time. Then I opened my phone and dialed. It rang twice before my mother answered. "Margaret?" Her voice was cheery, guarded. I could hear her setting down a coffee mug. "I just need to ask you something," I said. "Of course," she replied. "Did Isolde ever tell you where she got the idea for her final piece in the show?" There was a beat. Then two. "Well, she's always said you inspired her, sweetheart. I mean, you've had your challenges, and she's always been very sensitive to that." That word again, challenges, like I was a pop quiz life, gave her that she had to pass. I asked, more pointed this time. "Did she say it was my design?" Another pause, longer. "She didn't say that exactly. But Margaret, you've always been so creative, and Isolde, well, she's making something real from it. She's putting it out into the world." My jaw tightened. Then she added gently, like she thought she was helping, "You should be proud. People like her don't always talk about family." "People like her." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just ended the call. I walked outside the hotel and started walking aimlessly through the neighborhood. My phone stayed in my pocket. The sky had turned to that burnt gray that Los Angeles pretends is normal. The sidewalks were cracked, trees too perfect, murals trying too hard. I passed a storefront selling hand-woven rugs. The next building had a children's therapy center, its windows painted with bright shapes, bubble letters, and inside, through the glass, I saw a kid tapping a sensory board with intense focus. I kept walking. When someone rewrites your story, I murmured, they don't just erase you, they erase your place in the room. That's what it felt like. Not erased, but removed, repositioned. I wasn't the architect. I wasn't even a brick. I was background, reframed as concept, sold as novelty. I remembered a line from a Maya Angelou book I'd underlined years ago. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. And I wasn't going to carry this silence any longer. Not just mine, but everyone else's who'd been called muse when they were really material. That night, I sat on the bed, reopened the draft email to Leoran. The screen blinked at me like it was waiting. I added 2 lines. They used my story. And now they're monetizing my silence. I think you know this. I hope you do. I hovered for half a second, then clicked send. I didn't feel lighter. I felt louder. I hit send. And this time, if silence follows, it won't be mine. The next morning, I woke to a notification buzzing through my phone before the sun had fully risen. Groggy, I swiped it open, half expecting it to be spam or a flight reminder. But there it was. Subject line bold and impossible to ignore. Your runway access tonight, 7 p.m. I blinked. I never RSVP'd. I hadn't clicked any links, responded to any PR outreach. And yet, there it was. My name, front and center, attached to a QR code and a personal seat assignment. When you're not part of the design, I muttered, you become the backdrop. I took a shower that felt more like a rinse, put on black, nothing flashy. I wasn't going to support, I was going to witness. The venue was as expected. Downtown, overly lit, self-aware in that painfully curated way. Everything from the signage to the scent piped through the vents, screamed exclusivity. I walked in alone, scanned my code, nodded at no one. Inside, the space was humming. People in designer clothes floated past, champagne in hand, congratulating each other on future successes that hadn't happened yet. My seat was toward the back, intentional, I was sure, but I didn't mind. It gave me the distance to see everything. The lights dimmed. Music rose. Something dissonant, industrial, layered with whispers. On the screen behind the runway, a title appeared in flickering white. Meltdown Look. My breath caught. The model appeared like she'd been shoved onto the stage. Her gait was jerky, unsteady, arms wrapped tight around herself. Her hair was wild, matted, mascara smeared down her face like rainfall. The outfit wrapped around her body in layers, tight in all the wrong places, leaving her vulnerable in others. I recognized it instantly. I had drawn that after my worst breakdown in college, the one where I couldn't speak for 2 days, where even the sound of my own breath felt too loud. I'd sketched it as a way to document what words couldn't reach, what it felt like to drown while still breathing. Now it was a fashion statement. The crowd gasped in awe. Then applause. One voice behind me said, "So raw, so brave of Isolde to channel that." Brave? I dug my nails into the palm of my hand and whispered, "It wasn't brave. It was stolen." I didn't cry. I memorized. Scene after scene followed. Themes of distortion, containment, echo, all eerily familiar. Then came a model wearing what looked like a belt made of small, glinting discs. The spotlight caught one, and for a split second, I froze. Fidget spinners. Glitterized. Color-coded. Blue. With a chipped edge. They weren't just props. They were mine. I had used them during tactile therapy. They'd helped me stay grounded, helped me sit through group sessions without unraveling. I kept them in a velvet pouch. Once, years ago, Isolde had picked one up from my desk and said, "This thing's so ugly it might be high fashion." And now it was. The audience oohed like they were at a fireworks show. Applause again. Someone said, "Genius! Taking childhood and making it couture?" It wasn't childhood, it was survival. And here it was, twisted into accessory. Pain looks so cheerful when you don't have to carry it, I said to myself. I stayed until the end. Didn't leave early. I didn't want to give her that. When the lights came up, I slipped out the back exit, avoiding the lobby where the press had started to swarm. The alley behind the venue was quiet. I sat on a metal bench near the loading dock, breathing in the sharp smell of dust and diesel. I pulled out my phone, opened notes. Title, Documentation. Line 1, Meltdown Look, inspired by July Breakdown, 2016. No credit. Line 2, Blue spinner belt, identical to Model 4 used in OT. No credit. Line 3, Lioran? Waiting. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't rage online. I recorded. The worst kind of erasure isn't when they forget you. It's when they remember, and still choose to pretend you never mattered. If they wanted my silence to be stylish, I'd let it look like a lawsuit. I barely slept. The silence in my inbox was louder than the noise outside the hotel window. Horns, deliveries, late-night drunks yelling about the Lakers. But inside my phone? Nothing. No reply from Lioran. Just a headline from an industry blog that made my stomach turn. Isolde's masterpiece, Meltdown as Modernism. There it was, my breakdown, rebranded as high art, framed with words like brave and visionary, like she'd reached into the storm of someone else's trauma and decided it would look better under spotlights. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at the screen until the brightness blurred and the room faded into shapes. And then I wrote again. This time, I didn't bother with pleasantries. You knew, didn't you? No sign-off, no padding, just those 5 words. Still no reply. Later that afternoon, I found myself in a pop-up gallery space near Wilshire. One of Isolde's making of installations had opened to the public. It was meant to feel organic, spontaneous, edgy, but it felt calculated. On one wall, credits were printed on matte vinyl. Designers, models, stylists, sponsors. Then, creative consultant, Lioran M. There it was, plain as daylight. I walked up to a young woman, arranging a set of catalogs near the front. "Excuse me," I said gently. "Is Lioran here today?" She blinked fast. "He's not available. He's not commenting on any design elements. He's under NDA. I took a beat. So he wasn't allowed to say the concept came from me? She didn't answer right away. Then, I don't think he was supposed to know. That stung more than I expected. I nodded, thanked her, turned away. My heels echoed on the concrete floor as I walked out. In my chest, something shifted. Not a snap, but a quiet click. A recognition. Even the people closest to the process weren't free to tell the truth. Or worse, they were free and chose not to. You can't call something art if you gag the witness. Back at the hotel, I collapsed onto the bed, boots still on. I was scrolling through short clips on my phone, half out of habit, half searching for something, when I stopped on a TikTok. It looked like a casual behind-the-scenes montage. Models adjusting their hair, stylists fussing with pins, someone laughing off camera. Then a voice, clear as day. "This meltdown thing?" a man said, snorting. Totally inspired by her autistic sister, I think. Brilliant branding. Another voice chimed in, low and amused. "Yeah, she said it came from one of the drawings the sister used to make when she freaked out." Laughter. I didn't breathe. I played it again. And again. And a third time, because somehow hearing it repeatedly made it feel more real, not less. My name wasn't mentioned, but my diagnosis was. My life was. Twisted into a punchline. Reduced to marketing. I downloaded the clip, saved it in a new folder, named it Evidence 1. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text Isolde. I didn't throw my phone across the room, even though I wanted to. Instead, I opened my laptop. There was a contact buried deep in my inbox, someone a former colleague once referred me to. A soft introduction that never turned into anything. The subject line read, "In case you ever feel exploited." I hit reply. Attach the clip, the screenshots, the names, the dates. Then I typed, "They used my story, erased my name, and built their brand on top of my silence. I'm done being quiet." The final line took me the longest. I was erased. Now I'm naming every line they wrote over me. Then I pressed send. If I was their uncredited story, I'd make sure I became their headline. The first ping came before I even got out of bed. Not from my attorney, not from the press. It was from the artist collective I'd been part of for over 2 years. Subject line, update preferences confirmation. Except, I hadn't updated anything. I clicked through. My profile was gone. Not just removed from the newsletter, erased entirely. My name had vanished from the featured artists list. Even the blurb I'd written about art and sensory processing had been stripped from the archive. No explanation, no apology, just digital silence. I refreshed the page twice, as if it would reverse itself. It didn't. I sent an email to the admin, a woman named Rita, who'd once hugged me after a gallery talk. No reply. 2 hours later, I texted Lainey, a young textile artist I'd mentored last spring. She responded within minutes. "Hey, can I call you?" She sounded nervous before I even said hello. "Lainey?" I asked. I don't know how to say this, but I think they felt your posts and everything were getting too intense. I let her talk. I guess they thought the messaging didn't align with the collective's tone anymore. You know, after everything with Isolde. "You mean the truth?" I said, too flat. Lainey hesitated. "They're scared, Margaret. Isolde's big now. You've seen the coverage. No one wants to be dragged into a feud. I'm sorry." I ended the call before she could offer more soft words that wouldn't mean a thing. That afternoon, I walked to a small coffee shop near the hotel. It was quiet, mostly students and freelancers with headphones in. I sat near the window and scrolled through Instagram without even thinking. Then I saw it. A press release posted by Isolde's publicist, corporate font, a pale pink background, no direct names. It's disappointing when private pain becomes public sabotage. Envy wears many costumes, some with paint, some with noise. I didn't need a name to know who it was aimed at. The comments poured in like they always did. "She's clearly just bitter." "Jealous much?" "Where was she when Isolde was building this brand from scratch?" I read each one, not because I believed them, but because it mattered to see what the world believed about me. And I didn't reply. I didn't issue a statement. I didn't rush to defend myself. I just took a screenshot, saved it in a folder labeled Spin. Back at the hotel, I opened my case file. Every screenshot, every link, every statement that bent the truth into something softer for public consumption. I labeled them by date. I didn't bother with metaphors. I didn't dress it up in eloquence. This wasn't art, this was evidence. I sent an email to my attorney that night. It was short. Subject line, "I'm ready." The body of the message had only one sentence. They said I was jealous. I'll show them what envy sounds like when it's read aloud in court. If they wanted me quiet, they should have stayed honest. The following morning, I opened my phone to a voice I hadn't heard in months. My mother's. Not a voicemail, not a text. It was a podcast clip. It had already gone viral. Title, "Raising a Visionary, One Mother's Story." I didn't click it immediately, just stared at the thumbnail. Her face, pleasant, polished, seated across from a woman who built her brand on values and family truth. I was still in bed, knees drawn up, pillow folded under my arms. And against my better judgment, I pressed play. "Raising 2 daughters was never easy," she said, her tone soft and calculated. "One always needed extra care. The other, she needed extra courage." The host chuckled. "Which one's the visionary?" "Isolde," my mother answered, without hesitation. She took what she saw in her sister's struggles and turned it into beauty the world can understand. My hands tightened around the phone. The host laughed again. So Margaret inspired her? My mother's reply came like silk over a blade. Some people are born to shine. Others are born to reflect that shine back. I stopped the recording. That wasn't love. That was narrative management. And I wasn't family. I was footnote. I tossed the phone onto the bed. Not because I was angry, because I was done pretending the surprise still stung. That kind of pain doesn't hit the same after the third or fourth repetition. It just hums in the background like a bad hotel air conditioner. Around noon, I walked to a small diner around the corner. Ordered black coffee and eggs I didn't finish. The podcast clip kept playing in my head, looping, drilling in that line. Born to reflect. They didn't talk about me like I was alive. They talked about me like I was a character they'd edited out. Back at the hotel, I checked my email, hoping for distraction. Instead, I found a different kind of betrayal waiting. Subject: Unfortunately, we need to reschedule. It was from a podcast I had recorded with weeks earlier, an episode that was supposed to go live the following Monday. The body of the message was sanitized, but the point was clear. We want to stay neutral. We can't risk platforming active legal matters. Neutral, I replied before I could talk myself out of it. You platformed my trauma when it came from someone else's mouth. Now that I speak, you go silent. No response. Later that evening, Isolde posted a video, a softly lit reel of her sipping tea, watching the sunset from a balcony. Her caption read, "Silence isn't weakness, it's choosing peace." Comments flooded in. Queen energy. She's so gracious. Ignore the noise. Noise. That's what they called me now. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I closed the app. This wasn't about matching them anymore. It was about outlasting them. The next morning, I stepped into a local bookstore near the edge of Koreatown, the kind with crooked shelves and too many handwritten signs. I bought a journal with a plain black cover, no prompts, no lines. On the first page, I wrote one sentence. If this is the version they want, they'll have to face the footnotes. That night, I didn't scroll. I didn't check for mentions. I sketched. For the first time in weeks, I picked up a pencil and started drawing not to document pain, but to process it. They muted my story in every room I walked into. Time to build my own mic. The message came in just after sunrise, a quiet buzz under my palm as I reached for my phone on the nightstand. It was a direct message on Instagram from someone I didn't follow. Just one line. You might want to see this. Attached, a TikTok clip. The caption read, Did Isolde just say this about her own sister? I tapped play without thinking. The video was grainy, clearly shot in a backstage setting, flashes of mannequins, light chatter, soft laughter, and then, unmistakably, her voice. Isolde. She won't even know, she was saying to a stylist lightly, like she was sharing a joke. Margaret doesn't process things the way we do. She thinks differently. She won't notice. The stylist laughed. You sure? Isolde smirked. Even if she does, who's gonna believe her? I stared at the screen. My pulse thudded slow, then fast. I didn't blink. Just watched her say it again and again. They didn't cut away. They didn't edit it for nuance. It was raw, blunt, smug. The comments flooded in. She just admitted it. This isn't inspiration, it's manipulation. I have a sibling on the spectrum. This hurts to watch. I saved the video to my phone. Then I played it again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on the bed and let the words wrap around me like old wool. Scratchy, familiar, too tight. It didn't matter that I'd known. Hearing her say it? That was different. That was truth out loud. And the truth had a timestamp. I didn't have to explain anymore. I didn't have to defend. She had handed me the match, and the whole world had already seen the smoke. 3 hours later, I was still in my room, wrapped in a hoodie, drinking lukewarm coffee, when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a live stream notification. Leoran. He hadn't posted anything since the show, Nothing since he'd gone eerily quiet after I messaged him. And now, suddenly, he was live. I joined the stream with shaking fingers. He was alone in a white room, bare wall behind him. He looked tired, but not weak. His voice was calm, measured, no theatrics. "I've worked in fashion for 22 years, he began. "I've collaborated with brilliance. And I've also witnessed theft dressed up as tribute." He paused. "I'm speaking today because I was part of the early concept meetings for the Unraveled show. I saw the sketches. I saw where they came from. I saw Margaret's work referenced again and again, without her name, without her consent. My heart didn't race, it steadied." He continued, reading from emails, showing timestamps. There it was. My sketch, my notes, her design mood board, side by side, no commentary, just facts. "Creativity," he said near the end, "is not about who shouts the loudest. It's about who dared to feel first." And then he ended the stream. No applause, no drama, just silence, and a truth that echoed far louder than the music ever had. I didn't post anything, didn't comment. I saved the video, I recorded it, I backed it up, and I whispered to myself, staring at the ceiling, "You didn't just borrow my voice. You tried to bury it. Now you hear it without filter." They tried to dress up my pain as art. Now the world sees what they stitched it with. By morning, the storm had moved from my inbox to the front page of half the internet. I hadn't posted a single word, but somehow the silence spoke louder now. Hashtags were everywhere. "Not your muse. Justice for Margaret. Design is not redemption." I didn't smile. I didn't relax. I just watched. Brands that once boasted about their Isolde collabs were suddenly issuing values statements. One influencer, a wellness coach with 1 million followers, posted a video saying she was dropping out of a campaign. Her caption read, "I can't support creativity built on silence and stolen credit." I screenshotted it all. I didn't need to post. I was the story now, whether I wanted to be or not. By noon, another notification hit. This time from an account I didn't recognize. Anonymous, no profile picture, no bio. It linked to an audio file. I hesitated. Then hit play. It was her voice. Isolde, younger, sharper. Like I remembered her when we were both too tired to pretend. "Margaret always got the soft spot," she said, breathless, like venting in a car or corner of a party. "I had to be perfect just to be seen in that house." A pause, then quieter. "She acts like being different makes her special, like pain is a brand or something." I didn't listen again. I didn't need to. I deleted it. But not before saving the file name. She hadn't stolen my story because she admired me. She stole it because she couldn't stand the idea that people might look at me and not see brokenness, but beauty, that they might see me at all. I sat in that thought longer than I planned, until another notification popped up, this time with a familiar name. Elka. I remembered her vaguely. Tall, serious, wore flats when everyone else insisted on heels. She'd walked in the show, looked uncomfortable even then. Her post was long, an Instagram story broken into slides. Plain white background, black text, simple, no hashtags. I was part of Isolde's last show, and I regret it. She went on to describe the process, the secrecy, the way references were thrown around casually but never explained. "We weren't told the truth," she wrote. "The inspiration wasn't a character, it was a person. A sister, a story that wasn't hers." She admitted she'd been told not to ask questions. "Just walk. Don't think too much. It's fashion." Then she shared screenshots of emails, her stepping down from an upcoming campaign, walking away from a major contract. No press spin, no interview, just quiet truth. And it shook something in people. Comments poured in, not performative, but real. "She's brave for saying this. Takes guts to admit complicity." She just did what everyone else was too scared to. I screenshotted every frame. Then closed my phone. For the first time since this began, I felt the floor under me shift. Not because I had forced it, but because someone else had finally stood up and said, "Enough." I pulled out the journal again, the one I'd written in at the bookstore. If this is the version they want, I picked up the pen. I'll release the one they're not ready for. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ownership, about writing my own ending, not to erase hers, but to make sure mine wasn't buried underneath it. She wrapped herself in my pain, but forgot. I still hold the thread. The office was tucked between a smoothie shop and a real estate firm, but once you stepped inside, the tone shifted. Quiet, too cold. Air-conditioned silence made sharp by the faint smell of carpet glue and anxiety. I sat across from my attorney at a table meant for 6. The other side had 2 people, a legal rep and a publicist. No Isolde. Of course. The rep introduced himself, tried to open with pleasantries, but I cut him off. "I'm not here to discuss feelings," I said. "I'm here to set the record." My attorney slid the folder across the table, thick, organized, methodical. Inside were the dates, the sketches, my original drawings, emails showing timelines, screenshots of TikToks, transcripts of Lyoran's livestream, Elka's resignation, the voice memo. It was all there, everything that proved what they'd taken and what they tried to bury. They flipped through slowly. The publicist didn't meet my eyes. "We're willing to discuss a resolution," the legal rep said. "Privately. No media statements. A quiet arrangement." I leaned forward. "You weren't quiet when it was your version." He cleared his throat. "This industry thrives on mutual respect." "And I gave mine," I cut in. "But you didn't return it." My attorney spoke up. "Our request is straightforward. A formal acknowledgement of Margaret as original contributor. Compensation for unlicensed intellectual use. A joint statement." The room thickened. They didn't nod. They didn't argue. They just stalled. "If you don't name me," I said evenly, "the court will." And that was the moment it shifted. Not because they agreed, but because they knew they had already lost the public. They were just trying to keep the walls from collapsing further. They asked for time to review. We gave them 48 hours. I walked out without shaking hands. Back at the hotel, something was waiting. A slim, flat box, wrapped in gray paper. No return address, just the initials. LM. I didn't open it right away. I made tea, took off my shoes, let the quiet settle around me like a familiar coat. Then I peeled the paper back. Inside was a single print, framed. My sketch. Not a copy. Not altered. It was sensory shell, exactly as I drew it. Re-inked, preserved, precise. At the bottom, in faint pencil, "For Margaret, the origin." I turned it over. A note taped gently to the back. "They copied your pain. I saw your power." I placed it next to my laptop, leaned it against the wall. No social post, no caption, just presence. Quiet proof that someone had seen. Not what they made of me, but who I really was. The next morning, I walked to the community art center 2 blocks away. Nothing fancy. Brick building, folding chairs, smelled like old paint and teenage effort. I asked if they had room for one more workshop this season. "Something around memory," I said. "Maybe. Storytelling through texture." The director smiled. "That sounds like something people need." I filled out the form that afternoon. No press, no PR. Just me and an open room. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a name, finely spelled right. In black ink, on white paper. They called me inspiration, but now, they'll have to call me author. The gallery's reply came first thing Monday morning. My workshop proposal had been accepted. "Unwritten narratives, healing through visual texture," they wrote, with a warm line at the end. "We're honored to host your voice." It felt strange, seeing that word again. Voice. Like something I didn't have to fight for anymore. I stared at the confirmation email until it blurred, then closed the laptop gently. Let it be real without overthinking it. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. A message. Text. Short. I saw what happened. I was wrong about you. I'm sorry. It was signed. Darian. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 5 years. We hadn't ended badly, just faded. He never understood the weight I carried. Not really. Back then, he called me sensitive, with a smile that made it sound like a flaw. Said I should stop taking things so personally. The message wasn't dramatic. No excuses. Just one more line. If you ever want to talk, I'd like to listen this time. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit there. For hours. Later that night, wrapped in my favorite blanket, I typed just one sentence. Thank you. That version of me needed to hear that, even if she's not here anymore. He responded within minutes. She deserved better, you still do. I didn't smile because I needed it. I smiled because I didn't. And because sometimes, acknowledgement doesn't fix the past. But it does ease the ache of having carried it alone. I took a screenshot of the thread. Not to post. Not to prove anything. Just to remind myself I wasn't imagining the erasure. 2 days later, I walked to a park I hadn't visited in years. The one Darian and I used to sit in on Sunday mornings. I found the same wooden bench, chipped and weather-worn, still facing that crooked fountain. No one else was around. Just the sound of birds and the quiet crackle of wind in dry leaves. I opened my sketchbook, drew the bench from memory first, then from what I saw now. I didn't include either of us. I didn't make it symbolic, just let it be what it was. Some relationships don't need resurrection, just acknowledgement that they once existed. That night, I didn't frame the sketch. I didn't post about it. I folded the page, tucked it in the back pocket of the book, like a receipt. Quiet and complete. Back in my apartment, I opened my journal and wrote, "Closure doesn't ask for a bow. It just asks for silence you no longer dread." 2 weeks passed quietly. Then the final confirmation arrived. The workshop had a set date, set room, registration live. The location? Same gallery space where Isolde's first major show had premiered. Same walls, same windows. But this time, my name was on the front banner. Not tucked in a corner, not reduced to inspiration. Just mine. As it should have always been. Voiceover. Maybe I won't erase her name. I'll just build mine until it echoes louder. I didn't need to hear, "I'm sorry," but hearing it reminded me I was never the problem. By the time the doors opened, the gallery was already humming with soft conversation and shuffling footsteps. Not rushed, not performative, just present. The title on the wall read, "The Unnamed." There were no labels, no biographies, no forced context. Just art. Raw, textural, mounted low enough for fingertips to touch when invited. Alongside each piece, fragments of unsent letters were stitched into the fabric or printed into margins. Half-truths, unfinished sentences, some painful, some defiant. No spotlight, no music, just air, wood floors, and people walking slowly. This was Portland, the same city where it all started, where I used to draw in silence because I thought that's all I had. Now the silence had shape, and people stood inside it. In the back corner, under softer lighting, stood a version of Sensory Shell. Not the glamorized one from the show. This one was as I'd originally imagined it, wrinkled, rough-edged, imperfect in all the ways it needed to be. Hung next to it on the wall was a quote, projected in white text. "This isn't fashion. This is memory stitched into form." People paused there longer than anywhere else. Another wall had side-by-side frames. One held a Vogue interview. The other, a transcript from the behind-the-scenes footage that never aired. I didn't highlight anything. I didn't comment. I didn't explain. I let the contradictions speak. And at the center of the room, where most curators would have hung a signature piece, I left a blank canvas. Next to it stood a small sign. "This is for what they couldn't take." I didn't move through the space like it belonged to me. I moved like I had built it and then stepped aside. The guests weren't loud, but they weren't silent either. Some whispered, some pointed gently. A few cried quietly, not from sadness, but from recognition. Isolde didn't come. I hadn't invited her. But near the entrance, nestled into the corner of a bench, I saw a small bouquet of white tulips. No card, no note. I didn't touch it, didn't interpret it. I just let it be. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, walked up to me later in the evening, wide-eyed and serious. "Did you make all this?" she asked. I knelt slightly to her height. "Some of it," I said. "Some of it made me." She nodded once, thoughtfully, and ran back to her group. Among them was Elke, standing near the snacks, laughing with someone over something unrelated to any of this. Our eyes met. I gave her a small nod. She returned it without needing words. That was enough. Later that night, I left the gallery alone. Portland's drizzle hadn't let up all day. The kind that didn't soak you, just reminded you it was there. I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and walked down the sidewalk without umbrella or rush. I passed a cafe I used to sit in years ago, when things felt too big, and I needed the noise of strangers to quiet the noise inside my head. It was still there, still warm lit, still open. I didn't go in. Instead, I stopped outside the gallery again, turned around, and took a single photo. Not for a post, not for a headline, just for me, a bookmark, a closing page. "They used my difference to decorate themselves," I whispered. "I used it to build something that didn't need applause." I looked back through the glass one last time. Not unnamed anymore, just mine. Some stories end loud. Mine ended honest.